You've started.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, how's your day been?
Actually, should I tell them?
I don't know.
Sick for a week.
That's that
But
does
now I'm
stink,
better. So today's
good.
great.
Good.
Today's awesome, and I'm feeling a lot better, and I'm not sick anymore.
Nice.
So it's great.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Fair Winds podcast with Mark and Mike, the podcast that is not a philosophy podcast, but totally just is.
Okay.
I remember, so the first episode I said, I don't want this to necessarily be a philosophy-only podcast.
Oh, and then
here
we
are
100% made it into
yeah,
exactly that.
Here we are,
by
like
episode 2.
reading Plato. So that's exactly what it turned into. Granted, I was more against, like, I don't want this to be like philosophy. In the past, my philosophy classes, and thinking about it, when we're talking about how to live life, that is inherently just going to be a philosophy discussion.
Yes.
And like the meaning of life. So going into it saying, hey, I don't want this to be a philosophy podcast was a bad idea.
What did you want to avoid?
Kind of like the whole fruity, or not fruity, but like fluffy, going nowhere kind of thing. I want people to leave here being like, I can apply this practical information. You know what I mean?
And that's not what you experienced in your philosophy class?
No.
Gotcha.
Nope. Yeah, I specifically avoided most philosophy things in high school classes because of that. So
Interesting.
yeah, I don't know. Granted, like, that's just kind of the way it is right now in terms of Catholic high schools. Because it's all just like fluffy, rulesy things that sound good on paper, but then you just like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? You know?
I don't necessarily disagree with you. Yeah, I just find it... So, for me, philosophy is, like... My gut reaction to the word philosophy is so positive.
Mine is definitely negative. Granted, that might be part of because, like, growing up, I was definitely, we need more plumbers, less philosophers, as, like...
Thank you. Small conservative child, Mark.
Exactly. Like, that was definitely the mindset I had towards philosophy.
And then you met me.
Well, then I also
plumber philosopher.
Then I just started, like... How can you not be a philosopher?
You're right. I love to quote Peter Kraft. There is no human who is not affected by health.
Right.
Whether good or bad. You have no choice. You have health. You just have it well or you have it poorly. It's the same with philosophy. Everyone's a philosopher. You
right.
can't not be.
Well,
you can just be good at it or bad at it, but
right.
you can't not do it.
Even not liking philosophical discussions is having an opinion on philosophy.
Yes, thinking that all philosophy is unimportant or all philosophy is stupid is a philosophy, by definition.
So, what are we talking about today, Mike?
We're just jumping into it. Okay.
Oh yeah. Well, we've had our little.
You are business, and I love it.
Hey,
I love that you're like other podcasts I've been on. I was just recording an episode on... I know, I record on another podcast sometimes.
That's fine.
The topic was the banter. Like, we never got to the actual topic. We just turned the banter into another topic. And it was good. Don't get me wrong. It went well. We talked about city planning, actually, as a topic. It was fantastic. But I love that you're just like...
Hey, man.
And I'm doing everything I can to keep the banter going at this very moment, so we can.
I'm a businessman. I'm just doing business. When I was on the radio shows a couple of times, I just got really. I always got upset because I always wanted to just be like, okay, that has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about. Can we please, say actual things about the actual subject instead of.
You and I never go on the radio anymore.
Yeah, I don't know why. Because every time I say talk to Paula, she's always like, please. And I'm like, I'm always available. It's partially because I don't think I bring enough people on. I always just show up. Then they weren't doing in studio stuff.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
So.
Yeah, the these trying times.
Yeah.
But I don't mind being on the radio. We can be on the radio again sometime.
Yeah. All right, we're talking about the Lysis today.
We are.
Which is not the second conversation that, Socrates had, but it's the second in this order, correct?
Correct. So following Bernard Suzanne's ordering of the Platonic tetralogies or the Platonic dialogues in sets of 4, the current tetralogy, the first tetralogy that he gives us is the first Alcibiades, the Lysis, the Laches, and the Charmides. And so we did the first Alcibiades last time, and here we are on the Lysis. Do you remember? Should I put you on the spot, or should I just remind them what the first tetralogy is, briefly?
It's not, I mean, other than like, it's just kind of how to go about things, right? And like, why should you kind of care? The first one was Alcibiades is why, you should be self-critical, kind of. This one's about friendship.
Yep.
The next one is about how to be a man.
Yes.
And I forget what the last one is about.
Wisdom. So, well, the wisdom of a child, which is temperance. We'll talk about that. The first one brings up, what are you doing with your life? What should you be doing with your life? And why aren't those the same thing? And they come to the conclusion that you should be a philosophos aner, a philosophic man. And so these 3 go over philo, sophos, aner, basically. So philo is love. So philosophos, philosophy means love of wisdom. Philosophos, lover of wisdom. So philo, sophos, aner is a lover of wisdom man.
Okay.
And so this is the love. This is the friendship. Philia in Greek. Philia means love. It's one of their words for some form of affection. Friendship is probably the best.
So like a brotherhood.
Brotherhood.
Kinda.
I had a Greek teacher one time. Shout out to my Greek teacher. I don't know if I should use names or not. Who described this is family, the way the mafia uses the word family. And I thought that really is about right.
That's a good way. That's a good analogy.
Because it covers family as well as friends. What we in English would distinguish between families and friends, philia really covers both. It's these close, personal... Well, I mean, this whole thing is what is philia, so actually we can just go on with that. We don't have to define it at the beginning and steal our own thunder.
Yeah, so the conversation starts out, Socrates is walking along, he gets stopped by these group of young guys, right?
He does, yes.
And they're like, hey, hang out with us, they're having like a festival kind of thing, right?
Yes, they're having the Hermeia, which is a festival, and you don't have to worry about what it is for at this moment.
For this point, yeah.
Yes. We won't cover it at all this episode.
And then one of the guys, Hippothales...
Yes.
He's in love.
He is.
It's a very Greek love.
He is. So, to put it in perspective, Socrates here is middle-aged. No, Socrates is old.
Yeah,
Socrates
says he's an old guy
old man at this point, probably in his 60s. Hippothales is probably...
15-ish? They didn't say specifically.
I was going to guess young. More like 17, 18.
Oh, okay. They just said young.
I was guessing adult. He's probably a young adult.
They say the guy he's in love with specifically does not have his own name yet.
Well, yes. He is still called by his father's name because he is a minor. He is like 12.
Right.
So, worth bringing up now, just to preempt, we're not going to talk about pederasty this episode because I think that would just take away from the bigger discussion that we're going to talk about. But just worth knowing, in your mind's eye, just remember that Lysis, whom we will see happen in this dialogue a lot, is a 12-year-old boy. His friend Menexenus is another 12-year-old boy. They're best friends. Socrates is a 60-some-odd-year-old man. And Hippothales, who very quickly becomes not a main character at all, is like an 18-year-old guy. Just...
he only is there for like the first little bit. And
then he like is watching. He's a spectator for the rest, which is worth thinking about, but probably we won't talk too much about it in this episode just for focus sake.
So they talk about why he loves this, why he's in love with this guy.
Yes.
And how does he go about showing his affection? And he's like,
Yes.
words of praise specifically is how I do it. And well, his friends out him basically,
Yes.
and they're like, "Hey, I can't stand you, dude. You're talking about how cool his dad is and how he's all these riches, and then
Yeah, they use the phrase, he literally deafens us with the just constant praise of this young man.
So then Socrates is like, dude, let me show you how to talk to a lover, because he says, if you start like praising, especially overdoing it, one, he'll become like arrogant, for one, which is not good. Two, if you don't end up, like if he doesn't end up falling for you back, you look like an idiot. And three, you're praising him with the hopes of winning him over. Really all you're doing is being pompous yourself and praise, because once you do join, I guess, I don't, would they have gotten
They
married?
use the word conquer. No, there is no
Okay.
such thing as same-sex marriage in ancient Greece,
Okay.
officially.
I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, so once that happens, your possessions become his possessions, and his possessions become your possessions. So really, you're just like celebrating preemptively.
Yes, in a sense. To back us up just a second, I find it interesting that where we start on a discussion of what is friendship. The discussion, of course, begins with how does one engage with the object of their love. Like to get us ready for a discussion on what is friendship, we're starting with how do you treat this person? How do you interact with them correctly? Thoughts on that?
The conclusion he ends up coming to is basically keep him humble and like
Yes.
not keep him humble him.
Yes.
Which
is interesting, right?
I don't know, because I was confused,
Sure.
because just like
That's the normal response to Socrates.
I was just confused, like just why would that be your initial reaction, I guess.
Well, that's
Because-
fair. I don't know that Socrates thinks it's the initial reaction.
Or not initial reaction, but like why, if I wanted to win somebody over, I'm not gonna go like, by the way, you're just not that good. Like, I don't even like you. What are you even doing here?
Right.
Well, I just don't know why. I just don't know what's the point of that, I guess. Like, I can understand when you are in a relationship, having goals to like work on yourself and have the other person work on themselves as well. I understand that, but
Yes.
the point for me of a dialogue between two people is we should try to have. I should have the best in me try and talk to the best in you,
Okay.
right? And we should grow better as a process, but that doesn't mean all I focus on is your faults.
Sure. That's fair. Would you describe what Socrates does? So, to view forward a little bit, Socrates makes the claim that you ought not to praise them over much, because what you're doing is increasing their pride. And if they're already, like, quote unquote, if you're already dating up, making them, Socrates makes the claim, if they think they can do better than you, how are you making them fall in love with you? To put it in very crass terms, basically. And we'll talk about this later. And that sort of thing. I think that's more or less his main thing. I think his other things where you're praising yourself. Because if you think that you're worthy of this person and all you do is claim how perfect they are, you're really reflecting upon yourself. I don't think Socrates is wrong in that, but I don't think that's what Hypothales is like doing on purpose. I certainly don't think Hypothales is thinking, I would like to appear good among my fellows, let me praise this other person. I don't think that's...
No, I don't think that's the...
I think he really does just admire this person.
Right.
I think I think it's interesting, and I think we can keep going forward and keep that in the back of our heads of thinking, okay, well, that does seem weird. Because, like I said, I don't think Socrates thinks that's your first instinct. No, your first instinct is to praise something that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And Socrates is saying, basically, be careful. Don't necessarily just do that. There's more to consider.
Right.
And in fact, maybe the opposite of what you expect is what you ought to be doing. And so, yeah. Yes.
So the way he does that is he basically is like, he takes Lysis, this person that Hypothales is in love with, he takes Lysis through all of his inadequacies, or where he I would call it falls short, not necessarily inadequacies, but Lysis is a young guy and he doesn't have a ton of knowledge. So Socrates is just like, why don't your parents let you do X? It's probably because, and why did they let a slave do it? It's just because they have more knowledge.
Well, what's his first question, I think, is important. So, to back us up a little bit, when they see Lysis and Menexenus, Socrates says, how might I talk to this person? Hypothales says, just start talking about anything. He loves to listen, and he loves debates, and he loves learning, and these sorts of things. So Socrates just starts chit-chatting. Menexenus, Lysis's friend, joins them, and Lysis comes afterwards, and then Menexenus leaves.
Right. They specifically...
So worth just holding the back of mind, that's what happens. Menexenus shows up, Lysis joins him, and then Menexenus goes away to go do a thing, and Lysis and Socrates start talking. And
they specifically go to an area of the building that they're in that is quiet.
Yes.
And I like that as a note where it's like, if you really have something to say, you don't need to necessarily make a show of it. People will show up.
Yes.
So
yeah, he goes somewhere suitable.
I think that's
a real conversation.
Yeah, I think that was a good note. It reminds me of the Walter Mitty movie, where it says, beautiful things don't ask for attention.
Yes.
But then
I need to rewatch that movie sometime.
It's so great. I haven't watched it in like years.
It's a good movie.
We should watch it
sometime.
Yeah, we should.
Yes, and really, he starts with, I think, a very interesting question.
You guys have all the things in common. Right?
That's true. When he talks to Lysis and Menexenus, I was going to skip over that unless you want.
Oh, I was just really confused.
We totally can.
The question was weird to me.
He asked first, which of you is older?
They said they don't know.
It is a matter of dispute between us.
Which is weird. What?
Right. You'd think that's really easy to figure out.
Which is you and is nobler. That's an easy...
Also a matter of dispute.
Those ones, when they start to say things, I'm like, okay, that I can see.
Which of you is better looking?
Right.
A matter of dispute.
And then he's like,
I won't even ask you who is richer.
Because you can't be friends if one is truly richer.
Because all true friends hold all things in common. And so no two friends can have any disparity of wealth.
I had the question mark next to him, which is
wild.
Yeah.
A wild thing to say. This, I would say, and I'm gonna start by I'm just gonna show my hand. I love this line, and I believe it to the core.
Really?
I believe this line to the core, and I can talk about why a little bit, but I'm gonna show my hand. I think that is my favorite line in this entire text.
Okay. See, I read that line and I was like, what is this even saying?
Yeah, it means if two people are friends, what one has, the other has.
Okay.
All that they own belongs to the other as well. It's all shared property.
I can see that a lot more than what I was thinking, where it's like a rich man and a poor man just can't be friends. You just can't do it.
No, yes, right.
That was just like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
No.
and friends have all things in common, so that
Okay.
one of you can be no richer than the other if you say truly that you are friends. What I have is yours, what you have is mine.
That makes a lot
Everything
more
we share.
sense. Okay,
Yes.
I like that line a lot more now. So then he talks about when his friend Manassas
Manassas was the king of Israel.
Manassas leaves.
And a lot of southern people. Manassas walks off, and Socrates says, your mom and dad, do they love you?
And he's like, I mean, of course, right?
But I just love the image. As someone who works with teenagers, can you imagine walking up to a middle school boy
As a
and like
60-year-old
the
man.
first thing a 60-year-old stranger says to a 12-year-old, do your parents love you? Like, it's just fantastic. Yes.
No, it's a good.
It is worth noting that they are also how to put this. No, you know what? It's not even worth putting. We'll just go on.
Okay.
We can cover that in a whole other thing if we ever want to. This is not a Greek culture class.
Okay. So he asks, in relation to do your parents love you? He asks, why do they limit you then? Why don't you just have free reign of all of their estate, right?
Yes. When you love someone, you want them to have freedom, right? And Lysis says, of course. And he says, so your parents, because they love you, therefore they must want you to have freedom.
To be
therefore,
happy. Specifically
to be perfectly happy. You're so right. Catch me on that. And he says, they want you to be happy. And a happy person is a free person. A slave is not happier than a free person.
Right.
And he says, of course. And he says, therefore, your parents must let you do whatever you desire, right? And Lysis says, of course not.
No. Yeah. He's like, well, your dad lets you drive his like mighty chariot, right?
Right.
No. Well, he
No.
does, dude. Who drives your dad's chariot? Oh, he's got a guy for that. He's got a slave for that. And he's like, why?
Yep, one of the slaves.
Why does your dad trust a slave more than he trusts his own son? If he really wants you to be happy, and he keeps going on this line. He gives
he asks several things that Lysis is clearly not allowed to do, and the answer that Lysis gives for each of them is no. One of the slaves does that.
Right. And the
slave does as he wills. The father does not tell him how to do it.
No, yeah, that's another good point.
The slave is free to control the chariot as he sees fit. The slave is free to cook as he sees fit. The slave is free to... All these different slaves are free to do whatever their task is. They have the freedom to choose how to do that task.
Right.
Indeed, also, one of them is directly in charge of Lysis.
Yeah,
so
he's
Lysis
got like a
is
tutor.
The slave of a slave.
Right, and he's just like, what the heck, man? Why do your parents do that? And then they come to the conclusion is because not that Lysis is too young, but instead he lacks experience.
Right. Lysis says, I'm not old enough, and Socrates says,
your dad lets you
what
write.
in the world does that have? Yeah, there are things you are allowed to do. You are very good at them, and no one tells you how to do them, like reading and writing and playing music, which are all things Lysis is, I assume he is good at.
Right. And I actually made a note of that, saying that necessary obedience is better than chaos. Complete chaos. Because if he was really able to do anything that he wanted, anytime he wanted, the estate would probably not run as well.
Why is that?
Because he doesn't, like they come to the conclusion, he doesn't have enough experience in running things. And if he really was able to do, like the charioteer example, I don't know if he really has the experience to lead 4 like giant horses around.
He does not have the ability to do it now.
Right. Like,
yeah.
In him having the lack of an ability, not to say that he can't practice it, but him having the lack of ability would probably cause undue harm to him. Right?
Yes. What's the specific thing he lacks? They use a different word than experience, and I'm going to be pushy on this one a little bit, I think.
I don't know.
Knowledge.
Knowledge?
Yeah, specifically knowledge. To bring it up,
Right.
to bring up to a
Okay.
slightly higher umbrella term than experience being a type of knowledge.
Right.
Like he just says knowledge in general.
Okay.
Yes, he says Lysis. Lysis says, I suppose it's because I don't understand how to do them. Socrates says, yeah, I think that's right.
Right.
Because if you knew how to drive the chariot well, would your father hinder you? And he says, probably not.
Right, exactly.
And if you knew how to cook well, would your father hinder you? No, probably not. They go so far as to say, if you went to the king of Persia's father and proved that you knew how to cook better, or the prince of Persia's father, if you could prove you knew how to cook better than the prince, would the father let you or the prince cook? And they said, probably me, because I know how to do it, and the prince doesn't. Yeah, so we're talking age is not a factor. Family, rank, these all things. Like, it's not based on that. Really, the limit to our freedom is bounded by our knowledge. That's the point that Plato is going to really strike us at. Our slavery comes from ignorance. Freedom comes from knowledge.
And it reminds me, the other note I had on that was that quote-unquote happiness doesn't seem really to be the goal. Because I couldn't say that because this person knows how to drive a chariot that they're probably happy.
Okay.
But he has he has a purpose. You know what I mean? I think that's a better goal than happiness.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I suppose it's going to depend a little bit by what you mean by happiness
That's
and
fair.
purpose.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, at the end of the day, having meaning or feeling happy, I would rather have meaning in my life.
Would you rather have meaning because having meaning makes you happy?
I mean, having meaning, I assume it would make you, I guess the word I'm looking for is probably like the Christian joyful.
Okay.
So it's not like an emotion necessarily, but because suffering is still probably going to exist and pain is still going to exist.
Right.
But having a meaningful life would be a joyful life.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes. You are using the word joyful the way they are using the word happy.
Okay. That is interesting. Okay, because I did not read it that way.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. And then...
Or I should say this. Plato has in mind the deeper reality that you're getting at.
Okay.
Whether this particular Greek word is the average Greek speaker is using this word that way, fine, whatever.
But Plato is
using this word. Plato, I can guarantee, just by knowing Plato and especially his student Aristotle will later make the claim that the goal of all human action is happiness. And he clearly means something that is not emotional.
Okay. Because that's what I was getting at.
Aristotle's talking about what you're talking about. We tend to translate that as happiness.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's... Because then after that, he turns to... After this whole litany and many examples, he almost turns to Hippothales and says... Yeah,
that's how you talk to your book. Yeah. So what's Lysis's conclusion?
What is his conclusion? He says basically that I'm gonna have to learn, and it is impossible.
It appears that you are quite ignorant of many, many things, and yet you desire knowledge.
Right.
All you need is a teacher.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Lysis, that you are currently not very good at things, but you could become good, given the right, given
and you
the right
can't pretend
things.
to be good either.
Right. Yeah.
Because you don't have the knowledge. And he's like, "Yep, I would."
And
totally
Lysis
agree
says,
with
"Yeah, actually,
that. Basically,
he's very impressed." And that's when he almost turns to Hippothales and says, "That's how you talk to your beloved. You bring him right on down." And then he says, but I remember that Hypothales said he didn't want to be seen, and so I didn't say anything. And I was like, I pondered that line because of what is happening.
That, and he also was like, Hypothales looks kind of confused right now, and I'm just going to just not worry about him like that. He says, I remembered that he didn't want to be seen, but he also saw that he was in great excitement and confusion.
Yes.
About what was said.
Yes, he is very emotional.
Yeah.
That's what the Greek words are getting at. He is filled with emotions, conflicting emotions.
It seems like he's a very emotional guy.
He is a mess.
Yeah.
It is just safe to say Hypothales is run by his emotions.
And then Menexius shows back up.
Well, real quick. That's where I mark end of part 1.
That's kind of, yeah.
End of part 1 I mark there because then Menexius is going to show up when we get on to a new subject. And I just want to dwell on this for a little bit.
No, no worries.
Is that how you talk to your beloved?
Humble them and bring them down to earth.
And how?
By
what is Socrates' actual... What was Lysis's conclusion?
That he is ignorant and needs to keep... He needs a teacher. So he's more getting
He is ignorant. He needs a teacher. Why does he need a teacher?
So that he can not be ignorant anymore.
Right, because he has the ability to not be ignorant.
So the way
Someone who can't become knowledgeable does not need a teacher, because you don't need something that isn't going to help you.
Right.
So
And
Lysis isn't
later.
there, but he can be there, and he just needs a path.
So then the conclusion would be how to talk to your lover is bring them down to earth, show them some inadequacy, but then offer them a way out, and I assume you become the way out?
Kind of, yeah. I can see at least a glimpse of what you could be. And you and I both stand in awe of that. And I desire that for you. But I can only desire for you what you do not yet have. So there's something about... I love the way Socrates describes it. Not Socrates, I'm so sorry.
Aristotle?
G.K. Chesterton.
Whoa.
He's a
Very
different
different.
person. You can only stand in awe of giants if you are small.
Right.
The universe is only vast if you are small. Things are only wonderful if you don't understand them yet. Like, there's a sense in which the more humble you are, the more wonderful everything around you is, because you can see how good it is. Because you can see the difference between you and it. You can see that you don't have what it has, and you can rejoice that that thing has it. If you believe you hold all things, then
why improve? Like, there's nothing for you to improve on. And
there's nothing for you to improve on, and nothing's better than you. And
right.
You are the best thing, so you should adore yourself. Like, if you are truly the best thing, then you ought to adore yourself in place of all other things. You can only adore the other if you know that you aren't it, and that it has something that you lack.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense. That's kind of getting at, or I was kind of getting at that earlier when I was saying the best in me talks to the best in you.
Yes.
And we don't ignore the worst parts about each other, but we try and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can keep drawing out the best in each other.
Yep.
Okay, that makes way more sense now. When I first read this, I was kind of lost, because I was just like, why? Okay, you get someone to fall in love with me, just absolutely...
Just tear them down.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
destroy
Just
them.
break their kneecaps and just be like, wow, you suck. Get better.
You want to hang out? You're not very good at anything. You want to, like...
Talk about it, I guess?
Yeah, you want to kiss? Like...
That's way different than what I was initially thinking about this. Okay. No, I'm into that.
End Act 1.
Yeah, so now Menexius comes back from his...
I'm going to... Menexenus, yes.
Menexius. He comes back from his gymnastics.
Yes, he was probably doing a sacrifice. That's what Socrates posits earlier. I don't know if that's important.
I don't know.
I love that he sits down in his place by Lysis, which is just good wording. I think one of the important things with Plato, he's writing a dialogue, not a treatise. The drama of what happens is your way into understanding what's being said. If you want to know what Plato thinks about friendship, pay attention to Lysis and Menexenus, the obvious pair of friends we're discussing.
Yes.
So Menexenus came back and sat down in his place by Lysis.
And then he talks about...
And Lysis, in a childish and affectionate manner, whispered privately in my, Socrates' ear, so that Menexenus should not hear, "Do, Socrates, tell Menexenus what you've been telling me." It's a really interesting paragraph.
He's like, dude, no, you tell him yourself.
Yes! Socrates says, "I will not. You were paying attention to me. You tell him later."
Yeah.
Which is great because what just happened?
Well, it's just how do you talk... He just outlined how do you talk to somebody that you love.
Yeah, and what does Lysis want?
For Socrates to tell him... Well, for Socrates to bring his friend down to earth the same way he was just brought down to earth, right?
Yeah, I want you to tell Menexenus how much you love him.
Right.
Like, yeah. And
he's
what?
like, "No,
And
dude."
Socrates' response is,
Don't you...
"That's your job."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, there's a sense in which Lysis gets it in some way. He's so enamored by the way Socrates has spoken to him that he desires this for his friend. He says, "I've just experienced a good, and I desire that my first instinct when I see my friend next is to help them experience that same good." So I think that's one of my favorite paragraphs. The Lysis is one of my favorite dialogues.
Not really.
Yes, there's a lot going on in the Lysis that I truly adore.
All right. So then he talks... Well, then he's like, I'm not going to do that. We'll do something, though. We'll do something.
Yes.
And they launch into this discussion about what is friendship. He likes friendship a lot. He
says
he's
it's,
like,
"I have a passion for friends.
I would rather have friends than have all the gold in Egypt," or whatever. Or
I would rather have friends than anything else."
he says specifically, quote, "Yeah, by the dog of Egypt, I should greatly prefer a real friend."
To all the gold of Darius, or even to Darius himself, king of Persia.
Yeah.
I am such a lover of friends as that.
So then he asks, what does it mean to be a friend? Is if two people love each other, are they friends? Or is it if only one person loves the other, are they still friends?
Right. They start getting into a discussion that I like to frame as who can be friends.
Yeah, that's a good way to
Between
summarize
what
it.
two kinds of people can friendship exist?
That's a good way to summarize. So first he talks about, okay, you two love each other. You two are obviously friends, but say if someone loved... So, like, if person A loved person B...
I'm going to take 2 seconds real quick to remind the audience that every time we say love, we mean philia.
Yes.
There is a different Greek word for, like...
Sexual love.
Yeah, sexual love or falling in love. That's a different Greek word. I'm not going to say that is entirely absent from what's going on in the dialogue, because we can have that whole discussion at another point if we want to. But primarily, we're talking about friendship. When we say love, we mean to be true, deep, abiding friends with someone.
Right. Okay.
Go back to you.
So he said, if person A loves person B, but person B does not love him back, are they still friends? Or who is the friend at that point?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good question, because I don't know. You know what I mean? Because
I'm friends with someone, or if I love someone who does not love me back, are there any friends there? And if so, who? A, B, A and B, or neither A nor B?
I would my initial gut reaction, and honestly, after reading this whole thing, still my reaction is that if I love somebody, I am a friend to that person. But if they don't love me back, they are not necessarily a friend to me.
Okay, so you would posit that you could truly be friends with someone who is not friends with you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My gut reaction is to disagree, but I'm interested.
Because the way I see a friend is somebody that you can, one, rely on, somebody who wants the best in you.
Okay.
Honestly, those are two pretty big ones, right? So if I am in love with somebody, or I love somebody, then I will both be they would be able to rely on me, and I would want to bring out the best in them. Now, if they don't necessarily do those back, I'm still a friend to them, but they aren't a friend to me.
Okay.
Right? So there's a certain amount, like trust is another big one. If they know that they can trust me with things, I would be a good friend to them. But if I can't trust them, like we could still have a relationship, and I would consider myself a friend to them without considering them a friend to me.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I'm going to ask two questions that are worded carefully.
Okay.
Just to tease out something. Would the friendship be better if they loved you back?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Would your friendship be better if they loved you back?
It would be easier.
Would it be better?
I would. My initial reaction would be to assume yes.
Okay.
Because we can draw out. It would make me a better person, so I could better love them.
Okay.
So I could be a better person to them.
Yeah. Here's how I might present this. Someone to present the same thing you just said. Here's how I might present it. And let me know if this makes sense or if this isn't what you're getting at. The form of friendship is mutual. The one perfect and eternal form that is friendship in its perfect form is mutual.
Yes.
Now, if it's not mutual, that means there is a defect in it. And you could go one of two routes. One, you could say any defect from the form, it means it's no longer the thing. Or you could say that it's just an imperfect form of it. So if the perfect form of friendship is mutual, if that's one of its category, one of its properties, then quote unquote friendship that isn't mutual isn't friendship, or is at least imperfect friendship.
I'd be more inclined to call it imperfect friendship than not friendship at all.
I am too, with this specific example.
Right.
Yes. So I think that's in a sense where there is a sense in which we can say there is a friend, but we're calling it a friend knowing that it's pointing towards a deeper reality than it has. It doesn't yet have the fullness of what we would call friendship, but it's working towards it.
Yes.
So we might call it it's a friend that it's friendship that is somewhere between potential and actual. One day we'll talk about potential and actual. Potential.
Okay, yeah. No, I get you.
Yeah, potential means it isn't, but it could be, and actual is it can be and it is.
No, that makes sense.
So it's somewhere on the journey from potential to actual. Okay.
In that same question, he says, "Can you be friends with objects that can't love you back?"
You are really close to maybe saying yes, but do you want to say no?
I mean,
I could defend it either way.
I could say you can definitely really like a horse.
But can you be friends with
But it's not the same kind of friendship because a horse cannot be friends with you back.
Right.
So it's an imperfect.
And especially I think if we're looking at that imperfect is from potential to actual. Potential means isn't.
But could be.
Could be. And
so
if a horse can't be, then you are not on that spectrum.
Right.
It's not friendship.
It's
and
not,
Aristotle. That's where Aristotle says there is no such thing as real friendship does not exist between a man and a dog. That's
Yeah.
specific examples.
No, I could totally agree with that.
Ever be equals.
Yeah.
They
No, I can
can't
totally
ever be
agree with that.
Yep. It's something else. There's affection. We can talk about all kinds of different things. But friendship might we reserve to something
human
that's
on human.
Human to human. And actually, we can talk about it later. Aristotle later will say there can be no friendship between humans and gods. Because a human to a god is like a dog to a human. Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Early church fathers will discuss that. And they'll talk about when they're looking at, well, what does that mean? When Christian church fathers are trying to figure out, well, ooh, I don't know if I like the sentence, gods and human can't be friends, because that seems to be not okay with what we're striving for. And that's one of the things they talk about is so important about the incarnation. But we don't have to go there. I just think that's worth knowing where philosophically this ends up going later.
I don't want these to freeze. That's why I grabbed them.
That's fair.
The next...
We did that whole put beer in the freezer with a wet paper towel around it.
Oh, I'm probably going to edit this out.
Oh.
Okay,
no,
fine. Well,
we just put beers in the freezer, and I'm going to throw away a wet paper towel.
Then they discuss this. The conclusion they kind of hit on is that they can't... I mean, I think it's a similar conclusion that we just went to, right? Is you can't really be friends with... You can't be friends with somebody if there's no love there.
I'm not next to a mic, so I can't really respond.
No, that's too bad.
Okay, I'm back. Yes, there's something... I wasn't listening. I was opening beers. I'm sorry.
You're good. They come to a very similar conclusion that we just came to, is that you cannot truly be friends with somebody if there is no love shared between those two people.
Right. There's something about the mutual nature of it that is important to the form. And I agree with that. I think I'm going to go places with this, and I cannot wait. But, yeah.
The next thing they get into is...
Ooh. Beer is nice. Yeah, so the next one they ask is, can the lover love
is it enemies?
an enemy?
Yeah.
Can enemies and lovers be friends? Or can a lover and a hater be friends?
And I think we just can't, I think it's a very similar conclusion to I would have a very similar conclusion to the one we just came to.
Yeah, it's not mutual.
It's not mutual, so it's not perfect friendship. It could be on the spectrum.
You're arguing the lover could be in some way a friend to the hater.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it a friendship, but
Sure.
one could be a friend.
Right, so we might
someone who
say
hates
friendship cannot exist between them.
No.
But there is a sense in which one of them is causing, or is at least maybe possible or trying to cause a friendship to occur.
Right, and I think that Socrates gives this exact same example. I think the relationship between a parent and a child gets like this a lot.
Yes.
Especially
Doesn't a parent love a child? And they mean
Right.
small children. Exactly when the child hates the parent the most.
Right, and I would say the exact, even if it's not young kids, like a teenager.
Sure. Yes.
It's the exact same thing. I don't know. Discipline.
Or maybe a 12-year-old.
Maybe.
The exact age of person Socrates is currently saying this to. Right on the cusp of becoming a teenager. At some point, we don't have to get into this at all this episode, but I just want to remind the readers. Is it interesting that the people asking what is a friendship is an old man and a teenager?
It's weird.
I think it's worth knowing it's a teenager, someone who's just becoming a teenager, and an old man are the two people that we're given as the models of these are the people who ask the question, what is friendship? Worth chewing on that. It just came to my mind to go, huh. And I don't have any thoughts on it right now, but
I do.
Excellent. I lied about not having thoughts because I thought we didn't want to go into it, but you want to go into it, so let's
I
go
don't
for
know.
it.
I could just briefly,
Yeah.
because Cyrus touches on it, is
A little
that they
bit.
kind of stumbled into this friendship. Like they probably couldn't articulate that why they were friends very well because they are children.
Right.
But I would assume the reason is because 12 years old, you're just kind of starting to be able to articulate things, and you're wondering just why things are the way they are. And I would equate it to more like a 15, 16, 17-year-old kind of wondering what they should do with their life and making important decisions nowadays. And then a person who's in their later years looking back on their life, trying to keep people from the pitfalls that they ran into.
Yes, okay.
That's just my thought.
We
briefly.
went approximately the same place.
Okay.
Yes. It just came to me, and I think it's a great question for my philosophy class when we read this. That's why I was taking notes while you talked. Why is it that the askers of this question are 1, a teenager, and 2, an old man? And I would say a Greek 12-year-old is in a similar social position to an American high schooler.
Yeah, that's what
I say that without implying that our high schoolers are only as mature as 12-year-olds, but there's something socially there's a similarity there.
Socially, it's because when is like
I mean, he's a middle schooler effectively,
right? But
But I think high schoolers are still this is still ripe within a high schooler's mind.
You're considered a man when you're like 16 in ancient Greece, right?
18.
Still 18?
Adulthood is 18.
Huh.
But there's something we extend young adulthood really, I think, to high schoolers in a big way. And maybe this is me totally missing American culture.
No, American culture, you're not.
We don't really extend it to middle schoolers.
No.
In ancient Greece, they would just extend the same provisions they make for high schoolers or kind of young adults. They would extend it, I think, down to middle school. I think I can safely say that that's a generalization.
I think especially in young boys, it's not until you're maybe 15 that you're considered like a young adult. In my mind. In my mind.
So
and then you're not
second half of freshman year.
And you're not considered like an adult until you're maybe like 23, 24-ish. In my mind.
I think you're not incorrect about American culture. I think
that's
our
just
culture,
my experience with it.
I think you have hit the nail on the head for American culture, yes. I will not say whether or not I agree with American culture being right or wrong, but I think you've described American culture.
No,
yes. Anyway,
that's just my experience with it.
Not to overstate.
Then the next question that they get into, after that little tangent we had, the next question they get into is, can two things that are alike be friends?
Yes.
Which is... I'm going to be real.
Love the like.
This is where I started to like check out a little bit.
Okay.
Because
I can understand. This gets harder.
It gets a little heady here. Like,
yes. Might I run us through the 3 big ones they talk about?
Yeah, go ahead and then we can talk about it because we are...
He first says, okay, if we know it must be mutual, let's look at the kinds of people there are. Can an evil person... so we just said good and evil cannot be friends.
Yeah,
friendship cannot exist between evil and good. Cool. All right. Well, so maybe it's not opposites. Maybe can friendship exist between the evil and the evil? And he pretty quickly dismisses that as a possibility.
Well, because like evil
seeks the injury of the other.
Yeah, so you wouldn't want to be friends with that person.
Yeah.
Nobody would.
He doesn't even have to philosophically defend it in a sense. He can just dismiss it outright because it is self-evident. Basically, the argument he makes basically is that it's self-evident that evil does not get along with evil. For the more a bad man has to do with a bad man, and the more nearly he is brought into contact with him, the more he will be likely to hate him, for he injures him. And injurer and injured cannot be friends. That's the statement. So he does go through a nice little proof. But I think it's interesting that no two evil people, he's claiming no two evil people can be friends. Period. Insofar as you are evil, you cannot be friends. We'll get more into this later as he talks about it, but insofar as you are evil, you are not a friend. You may be an acquaintance. You may be fun to be around. You may be a pal or a buddy or a lot of things, but we will not award you the title friend. There is something good about friendship that you lack if you are evil. So
we can leave that now.
Yeah, we can leave that for now. A society of people who are not good for each other are not really friends. That is Plato's conclusion.
Okay, so what's the next one then? Because he says...
Can good be friends with good?
And he says no, right? Because
no.
Good, if you're good, you don't have anything you lack.
You lack nothing, therefore you desire nothing. And we accept the fact that a friend desires his friend.
And I... Kind of.
Yep.
But we'll...
Go on.
We can come back to it later. But...
I have thoughts on this that I think are the same things you're like, I don't know about this.
I don't know about that.
I've taught this as a seminar once, so I've thought through this a few times.
Okay. It's just weird to me.
I did come to a conclusion.
It's weird to me to say that. Because...
that two good people can't be friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on. Wrestle with that.
Well, it just sounds... It's... Because then it makes sense. And I think the word... It's not good, necessarily, is the word, but like a perfected person. Someone who's perfect.
He is using extreme words. Good and evil he has as the extremes. That's where he's going with this. So, yes. Perfect and utterly
weird.
depraved are the two.
I don't know. I can't really articulate it, I guess. It's just... My gut is just like, don't. No. Just no.
Yeah, well...
Because you can have a relationship with... If we've established... In my mind, we establish friendship as wanting the best out of somebody.
Sure.
If we establish that, and you're a good person...
Sure.
Wouldn't you remain to want the best out of somebody?
They're already the best.
Yeah. So
you cannot desire what you don't have. You can't desire what you already have. You can only desire what you don't have. Plato does say, the rich who desire money always either desire more money or they desire to maintain, they desire to avoid a future lack. So they're still desiring, sorry, for me.
No, you're good.
The rich who have money and yet desire more money. They desire the money they don't have, or they desire the money they are afraid that they will lose. So they're afraid of a future lack or a present lack. So that's his argument for really pushing it. You cannot desire what you already have. You can only enjoy what you already have, but you can only desire what you do not already have. So even if you want the best for someone, they have it. You have it. There it is. You can enjoy, but you can't desire. And there's something about desire in friendship. That's why I wanted to say the Greek word eros, which means desire. It doesn't just mean sexual desire, but it means desire. We're using the word philia here, and we're being careful to maintain that. But that's why I said I don't want to leave out eros. There is an eros to friendship. It's not necessarily sexual, although I have an example later where we'll chit-chat. Stay tuned. I will explain what I just said. There's something, to use the worst English term, there's something erotic about friendship. And by erotic, I just mean it involves a desire. It involves desire. It involves eros. And that is absolutely is the technical term in philosophy. And it doesn't...
It invokes something. is what I would say.
But yeah. There is a desire present. There's a desire for more.
Man,
and that seems to preclude good people, and by good we mean perfect, being friends with perfect.
I don't know. My gut is still just saying I wouldn't just rule it out completely.
Why is that?
I don't know, Mike.
Even though we proved it, why do you hate the truth, Mark?
I don't know. There's something about just if I am perfect, it would not being friends with somebody to me just sounds like I can't have a real relationship with somebody.
Not with a perfect person. And not if you're perfect. Yeah, I know. That's the problem.
It's just
this is
rough.
why Aristotle will later say gods can't be friends with humans.
Yeah.
Gods are perfect. Yeah. This is the problem, Mark. But isn't it a teacher? Isn't the best teacher the one that makes the students no longer need the teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when the student is perfected, the relationship ends. That's it. What do you do with that, Mark?
I don't know.
Fight me. Students and teachers should not be best friends.
They shouldn't.
You're right. No, I mean, that's just a lot of things. But if a teacher's a good teacher, the better a teacher is, the fewer friends they should have. Fight me. The better a person is, the fewer friends they should have, because they're closer to being perfect. Yeah. Let me push this wildly out of the bounds Plato is going for.
No, I would more say...
I spilled my beer on my text.
That's fine. It'd be better when you're teaching. You can remember that.
I will. I'll remember this argument.
No, it's just like I said. It would just assume that I can't have a relationship. Because the other thing is if
not a friendship.
A friendship.
And to be clear, you can have a relationship.
Okay, me and you are friends.
We are.
If
I agree,
we became perfected.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Done. We're just done. We just don't talk to each other ever again.
Well, no, I didn't say that. We're just not friends. We can still have a relationship.
Maybe we're something. Maybe at that point there's just something different.
Yeah. So
like I wouldn't. Maybe you just don't.
Let's
call it
hold
friendship.
this in our mind. Yeah, let's hold this in our mind, and say, well,
because to me the word friendship. Granted, I use the word friend very liberally.
Yeah. Well, welcome to English. Welcome to ancient Greek. The average ancient Greek person is not using philia in this very philosophic sense.
Right.
They're using philia the way we use friend.
And I would say, like, it would be more like a relationship with that person. So I would be, to me, when you say perfect people can't have friends, it's just saying, like, well, okay, so just don't talk to me. Get out of here. Which, granted, kind of. Because the reason why you would have a conversation with somebody is you would expect that they would know something that you don't.
Yeah.
Or that...
Yeah, one of the principles of communication is the transfer of knowledge.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so Mark, here we are.
That's so wild.
Now, shall we go forward before we...
Yeah, we probably should.
Because I have thoughts on this.
No, we should lay it out on the table
those
first.
Thoughts will make more sense later. Okay.
The next one he talks about is good people with people that are neither good nor bad, right?
Almost. He talks about opposites?
We already talked about that.
And he goes, we already talked about opposites.
Yeah.
No, you're right. But it's worth saying, they go, knowing now what we know, good with good, no. Evil with evil, no. Well, but we know that friends do exist.
Yeah.
But it seems like we've just ruled out everyone.
Right.
Good with good, evil with evil, good with evil.
Well, then he was like,
so what
okay.
do we do? He says, but I say...
There's a third.
There are people who aren't perfect and yet are not utterly depraved. Shocker. Are there humans that are neither perfectly evil nor perfectly evil? Good? Yeah, we've ignored a whole...
literally
Literally basically every person. Yes. He's going to say the ones that are neither good nor evil. And he's going to say that every single time.
Yep.
And I'm like, Benjamin Jowett, who is the translator of this one. English has a word neutral. You could have made this say neutral without losing anything. I'm going to call them the neutral.
Yes, I think we should, because there is a quote later.
Average might be another good one.
The average person, because there's a quote later that is really hard to read if you don't say that.
Yes, and I'm going to use the word neutral, and we're all just going to be okay with the fact that Benjamin Jowett decided to literally translate from the Greek. But
So
here we are.
He said,
So, can the good be friends? Well, can the evil be friends with the neutral?
not really, because they would pull him
Andrews,
down,
no,
right?
because evil cannot be friends with anyone.
Well, that and Yeah.
That was our argument. Was
Yes.
evil cannot be friends with anyone because it injures, and no one's friends with an injurer. And can neutral be friends with the neutral?
no,
we
because
just
it
determined
said-
that like does not have friendship with like,
Right.
Because there's no, the evil don't desire each other, because
and the good.
because they injure. The good don't desire each other because they don't lack, and the neutral don't desire each other because they're at the same level. Everything
Right.
one has, the other one has. They're neutral. And that leaves us with one last possibility: the good and the neutral.
And they say, kind of.
He says yes.
Well, he
I
starts
think
going
he
down
says
that way,
yes.
but then he says,
We'll get there. Don't. So
I'm ahead of you
I write.
by. No, I'm not ahead of you by a page.
I'm on 862 and 3.
I'm at 61 and 2.
Okay, that's fine. I cut to Act 3 here,
Okay.
which is right before they
So he
destroy
says
everything.
basically yes.
He basically says yes, and that's where we'll get to the end of Act 2. He says yes.
Okay.
Yes, why?
Because the good will bring up the people who are not.
Yes. The neutral desires the good because the good is better. The good is better than the neutral. So the good is better than both neutrals and evils.
Yes.
So why doesn't the evil desire the good?
Because they're evil.
Because they're fully depraved. They do not desire anyone.
Right.
They don't desire better. The neutral is not yet fully corrupted. And it still has a spark of goodness. And so it still desires goodness.
Right. They still want to be what they admire.
Right. And the good can desire the better for the other.
Yes.
And so friendship.
Yeah, I would basically agree with that. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Now, I added the second part because it's not in Plato.
No.
Plato
he kinda
says the
leaves it-
neutral can be good friends of, can be a friend to the good.
Yes.
He still said the good is perfect. It does not desire.
Yeah.
Has everything. The neutral can be friend of the good.
Yeah. It's weird. I would still say that the good. I like your assessment a little bit more, just because you could still desire the betterment of other people.
And I have a specific
And
I'll show my hand.
Is it
again.
because of you can still want something that you don't have, and if they aren't the
because I
betterment
could
of them-
have the best you
right.
and I don't. Yes, that is the way I would argue it. I could have the best you and I don't. I do lack something. A single perfect person isn't perfect because they still lack. No human can be perfect
Well,
because every human can still lack the goodness of others.
it's kind of like the Buddhist philosophy that Buddha achieved enlightenment, but he came back to show others along the way.
Yes, from a Mahayana Buddhism, yeah.
So that way he wouldn't be alone at the end.
Yes.
It's the same
Which
kind of thing.
I think probably flies in the face of Theravada Buddhism, but that's fine. I think it's more of a... we can talk about Buddhism some other time. If you want.
Yeah, but there is
Show my ignorance of Buddhism. It's quite this early in the podcast.
I mean, it's not like I'm better. So,
It's true.
but there is a Buddhist philosophy
Yes.
that says that.
I might be correct in saying it's Mahayana.
Or the
there's
Christian
some-
philosophy where Jesus came down, God became man so that he can perfect humanity.
Yeah, there's something about God who is perfect and lacks nothing can still desire, which is wild.
There's another Jewish thing too. Now I'm just referencing other religions.
Yeah,
that say
go
this.
for it.
There's a Jewish thing where it says the only thing a perfect being lacks is limitations.
Yes.
It kind of is the same kind of thing, where it's like God created the world so that there would be these limitations and that people can transcend them.
Okay, interesting. Yes.
So part 3, if you want to move on.
So yeah. So let me just make sure that we get a real definition, and I think it's worth reading.
Where's that at?
863, middle of the page. And so,
oh yeah, I underlined this.
Lysis and Menexenus, we have discovered the true nature of friendship. There can be no doubt of it. Friendship is the love which by reason of the presence of evil, the neither good nor evil has of the good, either in the soul or in the body or anywhere.
That is really hard to read.
Yeah, the neutral, recognizing an evil in itself, desires the good.
So that it can become the good.
That it can avoid the evil. So the neutral, because of evil, desires the good. The love that is fueled by that is friendship. They both agreed and entirely assented, and for a moment I rejoiced.
And then he's just like,
And then a most unaccountable suspicion came across me, and I felt that the conclusion was untrue. I was pained, and said, Alas, Lysis and Menexenus, I'm afraid we have been grasping at a shadow only. So dramatic.
Yeah, a little bit.
So dramatic.
A little bit.
Why do you say so? Said Menexenus. I'm afraid, I said, that the argument about friendship is false. Arguments, like men, are often pretenders. Which is a great line from Socrates, the master of argument. Arguments like men are often pretenders. Never stop.
And it's weird.
Never stop asking.
I thought the definition was pretty solid.
I think it is pretty solid. Now, yeah, what's his problem?
What is his problem?
He says, then friendship only exists because evil exists. And a perfect world has no friends.
It's the same problem that we ran into.
A little bit. Yeah, he says, because of evil. But can evil be the cause of a good? Can a good exist only because an evil does?
Right, and then
does the nature of a good depend upon the nature of an evil? And
right.
That is that, yeah.
And he said that can't happen because then nobody would ever want to be good. Eventually.
Right, because once you get to good, you're going to remove all meaning to the term goodness.
Right.
There will be no evil to compare it to.
Which is
not the dumbest thing anyone's ever said.
The worst? Yeah.
I have an argument against it, but...
What is your argument?
Well, first let me go back. He does say we should try to find a definition of friendship which does not depend upon evil. We should we should define friendship. If friendship is a desire, it should be chiefly defined by what it desires, not by what it avoids.
Okay.
Right? Its principal cause should be the desirer or the desired thing, not the third party avoided thing. And he says this because we want first principles. We don't want to define anything as a negation, because we don't want negative definitions, because those are always shaky. If you define down as everything that's not up, you don't really know what down is.
Right.
You know what it's not. And that's different.
It's a start, but it's not the end.
Right. What he's basically saying is our definition is imperfect.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
There's a better one somewhere. We just don't know what it is yet. So are you checking the time?
Yeah, I think we'll be fine.
We're going to go...
We're at like an hour and 15. We're going to go way...
We're going to go real long on the Lysis. And
that's fine, because there's a lot to talk about.
It really is.
And I'm talking about this, I'm a lot more into it than I was reading it.
I understand. This is what every single day of my philosophy class is. I make my students read some philosopher, and then I come to class and make them want to read the philosopher I just made them read.
Right.
Like that's
which is
what ends
good.
up happening.
Like, I think the conversation is way more rich. A conversation
Well, the
about
good
this
only
is-
happens when two minds strike against each other and thereby produce a spark.
There's a note in
You know?
here that I had about this.
Yeah, go for it.
Before we get too far out of it, is
And also the vessel which contains the wine.
we
That was just the line that Maya saw.
no
Drinking.
when he talks about
12-year-olds.
can something be white if it was like painted over?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you have corruptive evil and cotative evil.
And the same kind of
What we
thing
might
for
call
the good
substantive
too.
and accidental. Aristotle will give them those titles.
He says that there's the same thing for the good.
Yes.
And
So if you paint your hair white, is it really white? The answer is no. But if you
Right.
become old,
and it becomes white.
is it really white? And the answer is yes. There's a difference between being painted white and being truly white.
Right. And I just wrote in my notes, my humble notes, it is better to transcend the limitations than just completely remove them. So there's something lost when you just completely get rid of something out of the blue.
Go on. I might know what you're talking about.
So part of the thing that would just okay, if I had like a crippling fear of heights,
Yes.
right? It would be better for me to get over my fear of heights and transcend it rather than just avoid heights altogether.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So when it,
There's a nobility in getting better, not just avoiding
Or like-
a reminder of how much you lack.
right, or like it's more meaningful to work hard and attain something than it is to just be given it outright.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
just
there's
kinda like that.
there's value in the struggle.
right. That's just kind of what I was talking about. So like
Yeah.
you can't part of the way to and it kind of goes back to this can the perfected be friends is when you remove somebody's faults, you don't love that person as much. You know what I mean? So like a little kid can't like do a whole lot of stuff on their own.
You're right.
But if you were to, in a thought experiment, just what if they could, you kind of start removing what is them that you love when you remove their limitations, as opposed to them transcending their limitations and becoming something new. If that makes
Right.
sense.
So a small child who is a small child who is not dependent on their parents is somehow not as good
Right.
of a small child.
Yeah, or it's just like it's not as
Or
you don't fall
someone
in love with
who there's a difference between someone who inherits a fortune and someone who makes a fortune.
yeah. I don't know.
They
It's
both
like
have
a-
the same fortune at the end, and they can do wonderful things with it.
Mhm.
But there is something different about the attainment.
Right.
This reminds me not to
Reminds me
always
of
keep bringing
Gatsby.
this into it does. Not to every time I say fortune, I think of Gatsby. I love the passage, and I was just reading this the other day. When Christ is sitting with Simon the leper, who is no longer a leper at the time. But anyway, and he says, I have a parable. Two men owe the same man a lot of money. One owes him millions of dollars. One owes him a couple $100. He forgives the debt of both. Who loves him more? The answer is the one whose greater debt had been forgiven. So both men are both entirely free of debt.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a difference.
Yeah.
There's a difference because more has been overcome in the case of the one, and it causes in that one a greater love.
Right.
And so now this is free gift, but a greater disparity has been overcome by
Yeah.
some means.
And going back to like the friendship of the good and the person that's more neutral, is the person who is, or if two people are friends, you are friends with the whole person, right? Yes. So removing part of that person, you're still removing a part of them, and the friendship isn't as strong when there isn't the potential to get better.
As we just talked about earlier.
Right.
Which is why perfect people can't have friends, Mark.
I know.
This is where we're at.
Well, it's just weird, too, because, like, the idea of a perfected person to me is also kind of foreign.
Well, that becomes exception. This is subtle, but you said perfected, and I said perfect.
Well, the reason why I say perfected is because I don't think that perfect people exist, but I think people can become perfected.
Go on.
If that makes sense. So someone right out the gate or everybody has flaws with them that they can overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But that's different than it's like the idea of Superman versus Goku, which is a weird analogy.
I love it. I immediately understand what you mean.
But Superman is a perfect person. Goku at the end of...
Goku merely adopted perfection.
Well,
Superman was born in it. Molded
well,
by
yes.
it.
But like actually though, like Superman is always like this person who has no limits, right?
Yes.
But Goku,
for a reason, we can talk about Superman at some point.
Yeah. But Goku is somebody who has overcome every limit.
Yes. Superman never had any.
That's what I'm saying. Like people have limitations. People have flaws. They can always overcome them. Yeah, I think everybody can. I truly believe that everybody can become perfected. It's just they will become perfected. They aren't inherently perfect from the get-go. That's why I said perfected.
Sure.
So
I have a place I could go with this, but it would take us out of philosophy and into theology.
Maybe we can talk about it later.
That's the scope. Yeah. Not really the scope of this podcast. Or later in the episode?
Oh, I mean, like later, like in a different episode.
That's also possible.
We're just talking, we got to get up to part 3 of this part.
You're right. We're 2/3 of the way through. Actually, I have so little to say about the last part.
Oh, really?
In comparison, yeah.
Well, let's get through part 3 and
partly because the last part is
keep going with this conversation.
Okay. Oh no, we're in part 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, never mind. One of the things that I wrote in my notes, Socrates' description that we don't want to define the good by the evil because evil cannot cause good. This supposes that evil is a nature per se, which is false. Good is the principle, desirous for its own sake. Health remains desirous in its maintenance, even if sickness is never experienced. Though it may not be desired because someone does not know that they ought to desire it, it's still worthy of desire. The good remains the good even if there is no evil, because evil is not a thing. Evil is the lack of a good. Therefore, if there is no evil, it is only because there is a totality of good. And the good remains the good. I will say that humans are better at loving the good when they have experienced the lack. We're built in a way for that. We understand difference.
Yeah. Well, it's
when we experience evil, we desire the good more. I would posit that's a flaw in humans. There's something about... I would posit that pre-fall, Adam and Eve loved good as good. They did not need to understand evil to truly appreciate good. It's a post-fall reality that we are only able to love the good, which we ought to do at all times. We're only able to do that by referencing the evil we have experienced, because there's something wrong with us, and that upon perfection, upon being perfected, that is a flaw that is gotten rid of. So I would posit one of the realities of heaven is that you no longer need reference to evil to appreciate the good.
Okay.
That is a pre-heaven. Right. That's an imperfection in humans.
Okay.
I think it's taken for granted, and I think it's okay to take for granted fallen human realities and experiences while we're sitting here in flawed human reality. But I think it's also important to distinguish between what is truly in the nature of a human and is thus eternal to you versus what is everything you've ever experienced now but will actually be gone because it's a flaw. one day, hopefully, if you're perfected.
Right.
There are things that you do not know what life is like without this, even though it's an imperfection. But one day, hopefully, you will know what it's like to not have it, which is wild to imagine because you literally can't. You're not capable.
Yeah.
You have a flaw in being incapable of imagining pure goodness. We always reference evil, and I think Plato here knows better. And I think he derails your confidence in the definition we set up on purpose.
And the purpose would be?
Because if I hand you an answer, it's not as good as if you struggled through it.
Okay.
It's the same thing you said. There's a nobility and a goodness to fighting through it yourself.
To the struggle.
Plato doesn't hand you answers on a silver platter. He lets you know there's a problem, but he also lets you know there is a solution. Fight for it. And I think he throws a monkey wrench in. Now, I think it's a rightful monkey wrench. We defined this as because of evil.
Yes.
There's something proper to friendship. I think Plato believes truly that two perfectly good people can be friends. I think Plato believes that.
Okay. And he intentionally puts this monkey wrench.
He intentionally makes you go, how? Why? But I think so too. But now I don't know how to. I think he does it on purpose.
So that
I think Plato's good enough to do that.
You can find a way to articulate it yourself.
Yeah, because you will learn by fighting for it yourself. You'll just be complacent in your answer if it's handed to you. You won't learn it.
Right.
You'll just know it. But you won't understand it. You won't get it. It won't mean anything to you. Which is the frustrating thing all of my students always deal with. Mr. Catalan is just really hard to get straight up answers from in philosophy class.
I think I that is a thing though with a good teacher.
I
is
agree.
Bringing out the answer from the student. Because it was the same thing if I did an AP when I did AP US history, probably one of my best teachers I've ever had. Someone would ask, the good example is I can think of off the top of my head, was the Civil War about states' rights or was it about slavery? And he would always say yes. Mm-hmm. Why?
Yeah,
go and he would ask you why, and then you would have to explain.
Yeah, because answering either of those is not really.
No, it's not what really happened. And then when you do that to a student, they can articulate it much better. Like in the future, they are able to articulate it much better.
Yes,
which is
it means something. It actually affects them.
Right, which is why I really like that class.
It's good to have at least one of those classes.
It was the one class that almost made me want to be a history major in college. I was like, I could totally do history because of this class.
Yeah.
But
yeah, once you see good, it changes you.
Yeah.
It's wonderful just to be the seed to show people there's more. There's a lot more. And you don't have it, but you could have it. Interestingly, isn't that how we said you should talk to someone you love?
Yeah.
Interesting. How your favorite teacher spoke to you as though he loved you.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Like, yeah, he showed you how ignorant you were, but in a way that made you want it. You wanted to be shown where you were ignorant because you trusted him to help you leave that ignorance.
It's weird because when I read this I would say this is a very articulated way of how people act out, and that's probably true about a lot of philosophy. Mm-hmm. When it's articulated well, I had an initial reaction where it's just like, that can't be right. And then going through this conversation, definitely helped me see that it was right, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like,
your favorite teacher is the one that made you realize how little you know.
Being able to it being articulated off the bat, and maybe it's just because the language and reading it isn't as effective as me working through it.
One of my goals eventually, so this is one of the texts that I teach philosophy class from, and I think it's one of the once I finish, this is all the texts that I teach in my intro class, I want to go through and make my own translation of them.
Okay.
Because I think Benjamin Jowett is in the public domain for a reason. It's a little bit older.
Yeah,
this isn't modern
it's
English.
It's a bit clunky of a translation, and maybe that's part of it.
It wasn't
or
clunky
like,
when he wrote it. It is now.
Or maybe it's just that it's better to talk about things.
I think that's true as well.
Walking through it and applying it to specific things in my life definitely was like, oh, I can totally see the truth in this. This is totally a more articulated way of things that people are already doing.
Yeah, it shows me things I already knew.
Right.
But it gives me the theory.
Yes.
The true vision, the higher vision, the theoria.
And there's a notion in psychology that you act things out first and then are able to articulate and extrapolate out of what you have acted out. Yep. And I think that's true.
That's Aristotle.
Yeah.
You learn by abstraction.
Yeah. No, this is good, though. I mean, do you have any other big points that are...
Yes! My other favorite part.
Okay.
Bottom of page 866. If you are friends, you must have natures. So if you want to desire each other, one must lack what the other has, but the other must lack what the other has. This is where I'm going to get into my view of what friendship is, coming from Plato.
Okay.
He says, then love and desire and friendship would appear to be of the natural or congenial. Such, Lysis and Menexenus, is the inference. They assented. Then if you are friends, you must have natures which are congenial to one another, meaning complementary. Certainly, they both said, and I say, my boys, that no one who loves or desires another would ever have loved or desired or affected him if he had not been in some way congenial, complementary to him, either in his soul or character or manners or his form. Yes, yes, said Menexenus, but Lysis was silent. Then I said, the conclusion is that what is of a congenial nature must be loved. And I love that line. He's talking about love is, we've gone beyond just mutual to complementary. Each one makes up for what is lacking in the other. And I love, yes, yes, said Menexenus. And Lysis doesn't say anything.
Because Menexenus
different.
Makes up for that.
Yeah, they're different. Remember, Lysis is shy. We've known the whole thing that Lysis is shy and Menexenus is outgoing. Hypothales told us this, Ctesippus told us this, but we also saw it. Socrates starts sitting down, and who comes over? Menexenus. And then what happens?
Lysis specifically will not go over on his own, but then once
Lysis
he sees
his best friend,
his friend go
and
over,
he follows his best friend, and that's how Lysis gets into the conversation. And then Menexenus leaves, and Socrates talks to Lysis, and Lysis now has what Menexenus doesn't have:
the knowledge
of ignorance.
Right.
And then he wants to give the whole time. These two boys are set up against each other as congenial, complementary. This is why the drama of Plato is so much a part of the dialogue, just as much as what is said.
Interesting.
It's important. What's Hypothales' deal?
He just praises
Lysis.
Right.
He doesn't have anything Lysis needs. Lysis doesn't desire him. It's not mutual. It's not congenial. Not complementary.
Interesting.
A little bit they are, because Hypothales is extremely verbal. Lysis is very shy.
Right,
but not in a complementary way,
not
in an opposing way. There's a difference between complementary and opposing.
It's not in the same way as
Menexenus is outgoingness. Right. Yeah.
No, it's an interesting way, because it's a really that would be my philosophy with marriage too. You've gotten to where I was going. You chain yourself to somebody because they you want to be similar enough that you can get along, but different enough that you can complement each other.
Yep.
And being two people going through life is a much better alternative than just being one person going through life.
Go on.
Well, because the other person can make up for what you lack and help you through things. Yeah, it just that's where it took me right away. Was
I have given a seminar, a lecture on the Lysis as the model for marriage. Marriage is the form of friendship. It is the highest form.
Right.
All other friendships are analogies to marriage.
Huh.
Go back to the first thing. I won't ask which of you is richer, because true friends hold all things in common.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's marriage. Marriage is in a sense the legal affirmation of that being true. The true best friends, one cannot be richer than the other. They hold all things in common. Yeah. That's why I said that's my favorite line. I was like, I believe this on a core and deep level. The two true friends of the highest form, there cannot be separation. There cannot be difference between them. They are complementary. And they strive to be complementary. They strive to perfect their complementarity. In a sense, they become perfect as a unit, not as two. Wow.
Dang.
It's so good. I love it so. I love friendship. I am passionate about friends, as Socrates says. I have a passion for friends.
I just like that. There's a quote where Socrates says, "Yeah."
Yay. It's yay.
It looks like yeah.
In this middle-ish, in this formal early 1900s English, it's yay, meaning I agree.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like, and I was
well, it
like,
doesn't have an H.
Yeah.
So it's a yay or nay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, but that's just that is
the Greek is probably panuge. For all you Greek fans out there, it's probably panuge, which means obviously, or of course, or indubitably.
Man.
Yeah. Isn't it great? That means that every time we're friends, it's analogy to marriage. And now do you see why there has to be a little bit of eros? Not necessarily sexual, but complementary. So to put it back in our terms of good, neutral, and evil, the good and the neutral are friends.
Yes.
Are there any humans who are truly good right now?
Probably not.
Right. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about friendship here on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a way in which you're neutral and I am good. And always a way in which I am neutral and you are good. Therefore, we can be friends with each other. The neutral in me can be friends with the good in you, and the neutral in you can be friends with the good in me. That's where I think Plato is leading us. He doesn't take us there, but I think that's it. Even if maybe that's not what Plato had in mind, I have the weakness to think it is. But as Chesterton said, even if the author didn't intend it, truth pulled from a text is true.
Yeah.
And I'm content with that. I have not found error in that to this point in my life, so I still hold to it.
It's a hard thing to pick apart.
Yes.
So, like
all great things, it is beyond us.
Right now, that is I would consider it a truth because currently I cannot find a way to get underneath it and flip it over.
Seems to work.
Yeah.
It's definitely true, even if it's not the fullness of truth.
Yes,
It is better than what I believed before, which is always a good place to be.
Yeah.
I only have one last thing.
Yeah, what is it?
Where does this take? What's the first line?
What is the first line?
I am always a stickler for what's the first line of a great text. I was going from the academy straight to the Lyceum.
What is the Lyceum?
The gym. The academy is the book learning.
Yeah.
It's everything you thought it is. And the Lyceum is the gymnasium. The site of its exercise.
So he's going to go work out.
I went from books to working out. And I was stopped on my way and went instead to the Palestra. Not to the Lyceum, to the Palestra, the wrestling school. This all takes place in a school where people learn how to fight one-on-one with another man. This whole discussion of what is friendship happens in the context of wrestling.
Now it's so much cooler, okay?
It's so much cooler.
That would imply that the friends that you make, you would want them to be people that you can contend with.
Yes.
Not somebody that's so beneath you and not somebody that's so above you that there's going to be no competition, but somebody that you can actually contend with.
Yeah. Yeah. And a true friend fights, in a sense, to recognize what is good, better in the other, and to become more like it, and to overcome them, so that that person can recognize what's better in you and fight to overcome it, and the two fight each other to perfection.
Ah, jeez.
It's so good, Mark. More people should read Plato.
I was...
You were so bored by this before we had this conversation, Mark.
I didn't like this, but now, oh my goodness. I didn't even know that.
I know. And it's because I have a fascination with the first line of every single Platonic dialogue and great work and anything like that. And I struggled with it, and I thought through it, and I was like, what is he talking about? He went from books to fighting. Oh. The same thing Mark just did.
Yeah.
You went from books to fighting, and you landed in a one-on-one competition with a friend.
Man.
And there you are.
Yeah. That is intense.
Doesn't it rock?
Yeah, that's
so
pretty sweet.
Good. Yeah. I wrote one last thing. Friendship with the self.
Okay.
I wrote it's a struggle to overcome the self. There's a sense in which that struggle really is key to friendship. There is no friendship without struggle. There is no friendship without overcoming something. I wrote overcoming the passions. That's technical jargon, but we can chit chat about that at some other point. But all friendship is founded upon a struggle for perfection. Struggle with perfection.
And
with
you should want to perfect yourself.
You should. So
you
that
should,
you're a better friend.
So you should have a positive relationship with yourself. Not to say that you should just have like a ton of self-confidence and just be like, oh, I'm so perfect all the time.
You're not trying to get better than the other person.
That's different.
Lord it over them. You're getting better than them because once there's someone better than them, they can get better.
Exactly.
And because goodness is worth pursuing for its own sake.
Okay.
There's a sense in which you're trying to become perfect because that is in itself the right thing to do. But there's also a sense in which you becoming good is the best thing you can do for your friend, because their whole relationship with you is recognizing what's good in you and trying to get to it, to desire that. So the better you are, the more they have to desire, the more they'll be friends with you. Because you humble them by your very existence.
Right.
You make clear to them what they lack, and they desire it, and yet you're open to the relationship that they can have it.
In a sense, you become like a judge to their
your existence judges them.
Right. It's the same reason why we have ideals now. Like, the reason why we look up to people is because there is a judge of your, like, to judge yourself.
Yeah.
To compare yourself to.
Yeah, the very existence of the two people is judge enough. And it's the judge who recognizes the lack in the hope of providing what is lacked. It doesn't condemn to forever wallow in lack. but it's the one who says, no, we're just going to be honest about where you're at because you could be better. And I want you to be better, and you want to be better.
Right.
But you can't get better by pretending you're perfect. Just the way you are. Which is enough of that song to not get sued. I hate modern pop music for this. I could go on a tirade about positive self-image positivity.
The same reason why I don't like a lot of modern, postmodern philosophy. That's the reason why I've kind of turned off from a lot of it, because it is understand that you are good where you're at. And I'm like, no,
you're not.
No,
you're not good where you're at.
Don't tell me that, because there are things that I need to work on. And if you tell me, and I get comfortable with the idea that I'm good where I'm at, I'm not going to become better.
It's okay that you're not perfect.
Right.
It's not okay for you to stop wanting to be perfect.
Yes, because
there's a difference.
The other thing,
it's a distinction worth making.
The other thing to go along with that is if I am not perfect, I see it as more of a positive thing, because there are bad things that happen, and if I'm not perfect, that means I can potentially try and correct them. But if I'm already good where I'm at, that means the world is wrong, and bad things are keep happening.
I think, and it comes from the hope of better.
Yes.
Someone not being perfect can only be positive if there's the possibility of getting better, if there is real goodness. If everything's all made up, if there's no real goodness, if everything's all just subjective or relative and just, then not being perfect is the worst thing imaginable, because nothing's going to change. It's all made up. There's no actual standard. There's no actual better for you to get. You are what you are. And if that's not perfect, then that's horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's it. It's only someone who believes in the objective goodness that can be obtained can be comfortable in recognizing their imperfection.
Yeah.
Which is why you should always talk to your beloved the way Socrates does.
Good to bring it back on topic.
Right, by showing them you're not there yet, but there is a there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get there. Which is, of course, as we discussed, the foundations of Platonism. There are forms you can know them, and everything in the world participates in them. Only a Platonist can be a friend.
That is a good place to, I think, wrap this podcast up. What do you think?
Excellent. I love ending on extremely bold general statements.
Hey,
I'm down for it.
I'm saying if we keep rambling, I'm not.
We are losing momentum rapidly.
Yeah,
if we keep going. So I think we've reached the end of this podcast episode, and I think we did a wonderful thing.
Thank you if you have made it this far. This is a bit longer than normal, and I think this is probably going to be our longest episode.
The Lysis is one of my favorite dialogues of all time.
Yeah.
I love it every time I read it. I love it more.
Well, until next time, I wish everybody fair winds and a follow.